Hello, today's lesson is on biochemistry. So biochemistry, as you can figure out, is a combination of biology and chemistry looking at molecules and the molecules specifically of life. So in all living things and how we use them. So if we look at this picture here, if you ever eaten an avocado, you'll notice that after they're open, they'll turn brown, just like a banana, just like an apple. You cut an apple in half, and when you leave that half of the apple, it gets brown. Do you know why? Well, one of the reasons it's the transfer of electrons within that piece of fruit or vegetable, whichever you want to call it. So as the avocado turns brown, or as the apple turns brown once you've cut it in half, it's because of losing electrons. Do you remember what losing electrons is called? It's oxidizing. So there's actually a chemical reaction happening within it that's oxidizing it. Lots of people believe that to truly find the fountain of youth, to keep our bodies going for a longer time than the normal human lifespan, what you need to do is stop your cells from oxidizing, not oxidizing other things. We need necessary reactions, but actually within ourselves, stopping the oxidation of our cells, which is leading to them to react and age and cause us to get old and die. It's all part of what's chemically happening within these living things. So when we look at this of why things are turning brown or why living things are changing once you open them up, why is that food spoiling? It's oxidizing. It's reacting with things in the atmosphere that it's now exposed to, that it is losing electrons, something else is gaining electrons, and we're having those redox reactions within it. So there's a reaction within that living thing. So chemistry is the basis for which biology is then formed on that very big level. Chemistry is the tiny level, studying the elements and the compounds that are put together, so then those building blocks can be put into the big scale biology, the study of the whole living thing. So an understanding of both is very important. So we go to the basic level, and this is our chemistry review. Matter. Matter is what makes up everything. You know that. Anything that has mass and takes up space is matter. And our most basic, simplest form is the element. Whereas in biology, you say the most basic, simplest form would be the cell. So we can look at our elements, and some of the basic ones, you know them: carbon, oxygen, chlorine, hydrogen, nitrogen. We have symbols, and you can't break them down any further. So we have our periodic table, which helps us with all of that. So when we talk about the elements of life, basically you're looking at this: hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. These are really the compounds that are needed in living organisms. So you can see 96% of living organisms are made of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. Those are our basics that you have to have life. So if you're looking for life in outer space, was there evidence of it? You're looking for this. Often it's just called HUNC, which hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and then C, the carbon for the K on the end. And when we look at these numbers, when you number this system, hydrogen 1, oxygen 2, nitrogen 3, carbon 4, they represent how many bonds each of those elements can make. And remember, carbon, we studied organic chemistry, was so special because of those 4 bonds. So we know about chemical bonds. Why do things chemically bond together? It's for stability. So once they have a stable octet, they're stable. They don't want to react with anything else. And they store energy within those chemical bonds. So when we eat food, when you break those bonds in the food, you're releasing that stored energy, and we're getting our energy from the food. But things chemically bond, whether it's covalent, ionic, or metallic, for stability, the stable octet. They bond together to form compounds. You're remembering all this, right? Compounds are formed when 2 or more elements bond together, like in water, H2O. We have both inorganic and organic compounds, so it breaks them up. And we talk about most of our chemistry we've done this year is inorganic chemistry. And the last unit was organic chemistry, which was based solely on carbon and hydrogen. So inorganic compounds contain either carbon or hydrogen or neither. They're made by nature and can be found in living things like carbon dioxide and water, and they're necessary for life processes. Water's an inorganic compound. You know that we need water for all of our cells to process and do things. Water we call the universal solvent, even though it's only universal for things that are polar, not nonpolar. Breaks up molecules, allowing chemical reactions to occur, and it's a very stable compound. So in our body, it's necessary for those reactions to happen. Organic compounds contain carbon and hydrogen together, and they make up the things we look at when we talk about our diet and our nutritional requirements, our carbohydrates, our proteins, our lipids, the nucleic acids that we need in our DNA and our RNA, so deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid. So in that, the element carbon is the really special one because of the 4 bonds that it can make. It can form rings and chains and do all kinds of special stuff. That carbon is really the basis of all life. So we have a difference in chains. We can have our alkanes, alkenes, alkynes. You know all this from what we just studied. So why bother studying organic chemistry? It's because of biochemistry. Without a good knowledge of organic chemistry and all the functional groups and the chains, you can't understand what's actually happening in a living thing. So medically, this is wicked important. So if you were to look at this chart and hit pause and think about which are organic and how would you know they're organic, hit pause and check them out. Which one are organic compounds, organic molecules? All right, so if I look down the list, we've got water, now inorganic, proteins, organic, hydrochloric acid, inorganic, calcium oxide, inorganic, water, again, inorganic, CH3OH, we got our carbons and our hydrogens in a functional alcohol group, definitely organic compound, NH3 ammonia, inorganic, potassium permanganate, inorganic, carbohydrates, organic molecule, or sugars, Na2SO4, sodium sulfate, inorganic, sodium hydroxide, inorganic, sugar, we have carbons and hydrogens, lipids, we have long chains of fats, organic compounds, H2CO3, organic compound, carbon and hydrogens, C2H5OH, carbons and hydrogen, organic compound, HNO3, nitric acid, nope, that's an inorganic compound, KCl, inorganic, H2SO4, sulfuric acid, inorganic compound, hydrogen fluoride, inorganic compound. Oops, we have a C's and H's. Whenever you have carbons and hydrogens, that's an organic compound, so that's an acid right there. Then over here, inorganic, inorganic, organic, organic, inorganic, 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 organic compound, inorganic. So if we look at nutritional label from an avocado, they don't typically label those. Water, 1 serving, 98.4 grams, total fat, 21 grams, protein, 2.7 grams, total carbohydrates and sugars, 11.8 grams, potassium, 690 milligrams, magnesium, 39 milligrams. So we could look at that. We can pick out inorganic versus organic compounds within that living thing. So macromolecules, organic compounds, macro means big. These are the big compounds, and they're built from smaller compounds. So carbohydrates and sugars, proteins, lipids, fats, DNA and RNA. Those are big molecules. So when we look at those circles on each of these pictures here, each one of those represents an element. Those lines between them represent the bonds. So it's elements bonded together in long chains and rings. So if we look at fatty molecules and fats, our lipids, they store a lot of energy. That's why they have all that energy for us. And a lumberjack breakfast, you'd be eating pancakes, bacon, sausage, lots of butter on your toast, and on your pancakes and syrup. What you're doing is you're trying to get as much energy as possible for that day you're out sawing wood. A little different nowadays, though. The lipids have twice as much energy as carbohydrates stored in their bonds. And you can see down in the diagram of a fat molecule, look at all those bonds there. So every single one of those bonds contains stored energy. The stored energy, when released, gives us lots of energy. Here's more. You can just see the compound, lots of structures in there. When we talk about lipids in our body, why do we have them? Why do we require that? Even if we're not being very energetic, we're just sitting at home doing remote learning and then watching Netflix. Well, our cell membranes, every single cell membrane is a phospholipid membrane. You can see the picture on the right. That's what's, and on the bottom, those are what cell membranes look like, and they're made of lipids. Our hormones in our body, whether it's your male hormone, testosterone, your female hormones, estrogen, your insulin to control your sugar levels, all those are made of lipids. Without the right fat content in your body, you won't be able to make those. Cholesterols, all made from lipids. Carbohydrates, these are for short-term energy. These are quick eat a candy bar, and the sugars are going to give you some energy. You notice they have less links in them, less bonds. So they're going to give you less energy. Carbohydrates in our body, we have what are called monosaccharides, the single sugars, glucose and fructose. When you look at labels, there's so many different labels for sugars. Look at any of your snacks that you eat at the labels, and they'll say glucose and fructose and sucrose and all these different things. So single sugars are the monosaccharides, glucose and fructose. You'll see there's one ring there in those pictures. Sucrose is called a disaccharide. It's a double sugar. You'll notice in the picture, it's got the two rings and of the sugars right here. So we have two there. So it's a disaccharide. Polysaccharides, you can see it's a long chain of sugars. So these are many sugars put together, and these are starches, energy stored in plants. We get our starches from animals. That's it's called glycogen or glycogen, energy stored from the animals. And the polysaccharides, that's why when you put like a saltine in your mouth and just gum it, the saltine at first doesn't have much taste. It's very starchy, but as it digests with your saliva and breaks down, it takes those polysaccharides and breaks them into disaccharides, and it starts to taste sweet. We have complex organic molecules that make up things in our cells and body, and those are the nucleic acids. The nucleic acids, like on DNA and RNA, contain the instructions to carry out life processes. What proteins do we need to make? When do we need to divide? How to do that? It's all in those amino acid sequences in the nucleic acids. So in your deoxyribonucleic acid and in your ribonucleic acid, deoxy double strand, ribo is a single strand. The nucleic acids are the building blocks. These are things like nucleotides, where you have phosphates, sugars, and molecules together, and you're going to then use those as your Legos to put them together. So you know about DNA and RNA, but they code for life, and it's the proteins that they're coding for making those proteins. So it's for the protein synthesis, the making of protein. It's also for our genetic code. How is everything made and put together? And it's all based upon those sequences of nucleic acids. So the proteins we need in our body, you guys do know you need protein for growth and repair. If you're working on building up your muscles, you have all your protein that you're taking. Carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, and nitrogens. You're taking those, making amino acids. The body makes amino acids, and you'll notice if you ever take protein supplements, they talk about the different amino acids they have in them. And those amino acids work to be built into the proteins that our body needs for the growth and repair. So they are the building blocks. There are 20 different amino acids. You'll read on cereal boxes, contains 10 essential amino acids. Those are the essential ones our body needs for building the proteins that we need for life. So they've been able to identify those. And because those amino acids are put together into long chains, the way they bond together, the way the amino acids are bonded together, just like Legos being put together in many different shapes, determines what their function is, whether it's growth hormone, pepsin for digestion, hemoglobin on your blood, collagen. All those things will be different. So the order of amino acids, the way they're bonded together, determines the protein shape. The protein's shape determines the protein's function. So looking at it from the chemical level, from what element is it making up the amino acid, then looking at the organic chemistry level, how those amino acids put together, then looking at that whole organic compound to give us a shape, and then at the biologic level, what is that function because of how that shape works, all the different structures that they're going to have. That's all of them put together. So DNA is used for protein synthesis, the making of protein. You remember about RNA and messenger RNA. So the order of the bases, um, remember that you have the T's, the A's, the C's, the G's, they turn to U's later on, but the thymine, the adenine, the cytosine, the guanine, those things are coding for what amino acid needs to be made, then how are they put together, and then how are they folded to determine the function that we need them to do within our body. If you think about it, it's just absolutely amazing. So these proteins in our body, they make up our hormones, which are chemical messengers for cell communication. They make up enzymes that speed up chemical reactions, speed up things like digestion, speed up lots and lots of reactions in our body, or sometimes even slow them down. Make up our cell membranes for receiving what things need to come in or out. So the receptors and also transport proteins on the membranes. And they're the ones that make your antibodies, things that fight off infection. So in this time of this pandemic, we are synthesizing proteins in our body. And if you've been exposed to a virus, they're going to be synthesizing the antibodies specifically for those shapes. So they're very specific antibodies each time, depending upon those proteins. So based on the following information, explain whether organic compounds in avocado are beneficial. Well, you can use them for everything in your body that you need, whether it be protein, whether it be carbohydrates, whether it be for the lipids that are in there. So when you look at it, if you look at the label of how avocado be labeled, one serving has 64 calories, almost 6 grams of fat, and 3.4 grams of carbohydrates. Well, we have our fats for lots of energy. That's giving us those calories. Same with the carbohydrates, but less energy. The fats for developing into our cell membranes, the carbohydrates and sugars to be broken down and built into the other things that we need in our body. So you can see the nutrients that are in there would be the things that we actually need. And we need to look at the whole body, and then we look at in our body, what is it that has to be built for our requirements? Well, that's it for our introduction to biochemistry. As you can see, pretty fast and pretty complicated, and we'll get into it a little more deeply.